Welcome to I Feel You, the podcast with your host, Dwayne Washington. I was born and raised with my family, my mom, my daddy Ronnie, my other daddy Dwayne, and my brother Quincy. I grew up in the 90s and 2000s surrounded by nothing but friends and family in the tight-knit community of Cartersville, Georgia. After graduation, I attended Savannah State University where I loved to party and experiment with a lot of drugs. I was even homeless for a point in time in my life. But that was then, and this is now. I'm growing and evolving into a better person each and every day. And with that, I would like to say welcome to Season 2 of I Feel You, the podcast. What's going on? This is Dwayne here with I Feel You, the podcast. And today's guest is Thomas Mitchell. Thomas is an avid runner, and he introduced me to the formal running community some years back when we worked at State Farm. Man, I never knew there was like such a big black running community and that it was as large as it was here in Atlanta. And I also learned about groups such as Black Men Run, Black Girls Run, etc. Thomas, along with his co-host India Cook, hosts a bi-weekly podcast, the Run Duo Podcast, which is available on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, PodBean, SoundCloud, and Google Podcasts. So today we're going to dig a little further into how Thomas was introduced into the world of running, why the Run Duo Podcast was started, and the future of the podcast.
Hey, Mr. Washington, how you doing today, sir?
Oh, man, I'm doing pretty good. How's everything going your way?
Good to talk to you, man. It's been a minute. Good to talk to you. But thank you for inviting me to come on. I'm sorry my co-host couldn't make it. She's actually been under the weather this last few weeks, so she actually hadn't even been on our podcast. So I'm glad I was able to make it on, but thank you for inviting us.
You're welcome, sir. All right, now, Thomas, when we first started the interview or whatever, before we started recording, we were talking a little bit, and I was just wanted to give you your flowers for introducing me to the world of running, first of all, and then I guess the world of black runners. And I didn't know how big it was in Atlanta and just worldwide. And you showed me some Facebook pages, a team takedown, and all other type of stuff. And I'm like, man, This is big.
Yeah.
So, if you could tell me how you sort of kind of got started in running and how you've transitioned that into starting your podcast, The Run Duo.
Well, as far as getting into running, I mean, I've been running pretty much my whole life. As a kid, I played sports. High school, I ran track. But when I got out of my college years, or at least during my college years, I really didn't do much athletically.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoyed myself pretty much during my college years. And as I got older, I was a real skinny kid. I was never one to gain weight easily. But as I got older, I started to gain weight, and I didn't look like myself anymore. And I think for most people, when you start that transition into middle age, you start to feel like, I don't feel like myself. You get a little bit of depression. And I thought to myself, when was the last time that I was truly just happy, just really enjoying myself? And I would say it was back when I was doing sports, because I played multiple sports in high school. And I said when I was doing sports. Now, of course, there's no place for a middle-aged man to go play tackle football. So I had to go find something that I could keep doing.
Right.
And running was that thing. And literally, when I first started back getting into running, I could barely do a mile. And I just kept with it. And, and this is before I even moved to Atlanta. This is when I was living back in Florida. And I just kept with it. And over time, I got better at it, or at least got in better shape. But when I moved here to Atlanta, I always wanted to run the Peachtree Road Race.
Okay.
But, my first few years here in Atlanta, I did not run it. I used to, it's 4th of July.
Right.
I was single. So I still wanted to go to New Orleans and go to the festival and all that. So I missed it. Then one year I said, you know what? this year I'm definitely running the Peachtree Road race. So I, worked it out. I ran the Peachtree Road race, and I saw so many African American runners.
Okay.
Being from Florida, you don't see a lot of African American runners. You just really don't. But here in Atlanta, luckily we do
Mm-hmm.
have a large Black running community.
Mm-hmm.
And a friend of mine was like, "Hey, you need to go check out Black Men Run." And this was,
Okay.
almost exactly, 10 years ago, as Black Men Run is celebrating their 10th anniversary this actual year. I went, did some of their runs. They did some out at Piedmont, they did some at Grant Park, but I would say most of my running friends that are still, even if they don't run anymore, I met
Mm-hmm.
at those runs.
Gotcha.
And that was my first introduction into the Atlanta running community. And the thing is, when you first, like, kind of probably when I first started showing you these Facebooks, and it was like how you were, that's how I
Right.
was. When I was first,
Okay.
like, so there's all these different groups, and and not only is it a running thing, it's a social thing. They get together and go out at night, they have fun, they have parties, that kind of thing. And it was, great place to meet, healthy women. So,
Right.
I really enjoyed it. And the more you got into it, you got that what we call healthy peer pressure, because you're in that running community. These people are like, "Hey, you gonna run this race next week? You gonna go do this marathon? You gonna do this? Hey, you want to go train run with me?" So that you're constantly, if you're in this group, in these groups,
Right.
you're constantly running and being encouraged to stick with it.
Okay.
So you get that point, and I'm getting to the point why the podcast started. You get to that point where you want to be a part of it. You want to, give something back to it. Now,
Right.
I originally had a podcast called Shut Up Tommy. It was also a running podcast, but I did it by myself. It was, it was bi-weekly, and
Right.
it was pretty popular, but I just felt like just me sitting there talking. I would interview people and stuff like that as well. But it was just
Mm-hmm.
hard work, the concept. I'm sure you know that when you by
Right.
yourself, it's hard to come up with that content, every week or
Right.
every other week. It's not easy. So I kind of shut it down and had decided I'm going to get a partner. I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
have a co-host, and we're going to start one with two people. So India, my co-host, she was in the running community as well. She already had a YouTube page
Okay.
where she talked about running, and she took people on runs with her and stuff like that. She was a friend of Heather, who is now, my partner in crime, my parent, my baby mama.
Right.
She was friends with Heather.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, you know what? That'd be a good idea. Number one, India is not a super fast runner. If you saw India, she'll say this. I'm not saying anything out of sorts. If you saw India, you might not first thing think is she's a runner.
Okay.
She's what we call she's what she considers herself to be a middle to back of the packer. She's
Mm-hmm.
not elite fast or anything like that. So I felt like her perspective would be different from someone like me at the time. I was pretty fast. I was running good times. I would win.
Mm-hmm.
I would podium every once in a while at races. Be in the top three or whatever in my age group, that kind of thing. I felt like it would be a good contrast between how I see things and how she sees things, as well as male female. So I
Right.
felt like having that on there, you're getting points of view from different sides.
Okay.
So, we talk about it. I sent her a text. I said, "Hey, meet me up at this Starbucks. I got something to ask you." And, we met up there, and I said, "Would you like to do a podcast, with me?" And like I said, I'd already done Shut Up Tommy. So she already knew that's something that I like to do. And the fact
Right.
that she was doing that YouTube page, I could tell she had the gift for gab, and it'd be no problem, with her talking on the podcast.
Gotcha.
So we decided, hey, let's go ahead and do it. So we started the podcast, back in 2018, I want to say,
Okay.
is when it started. And we just kind of gone from there. And we interview. Now we have our section where Andy and I just kind of talk to each other about running, about our lives, about all kinds of things. but we interview everybody from a back of the packer to we've interviewed Olympic runners. I mean,
Okay.
we run the gambit of who we talk with, and it's great. Now, when we started it, like I said, a lot of people give back to the running community in different ways. Some people volunteer, some people become running coaches. We felt like, well, at least I did, felt like this is the best way for me to give back to the
Right.
running community, contribute to it, that sort of thing.
Gotcha.
Mhm.
Okay. And so when you say a back of the packer, for those people that are not
Okay.
familiar with that, what is a back of the packer?
Back of the packer is somebody that is the back. I mean, when they run races, they are the back of the pack. They are the ones that
Okay.
bring up the rear. They're not considered to be fast. And what people don't understand when I say back of the packer, I'm not being derogatory. They call
Hmm.
themselves back of the packers, but
Okay.
just because you're a back of the packer doesn't mean you don't put work in. And that's why, once again, I wanted her on there so she would have her perspective when we talked about races and things like that, which is great because there's a lot of controversy about marathons right now. So there are what we call world major marathons. They're New York,
Okay.
Boston, Chicago, London, Berlin, and Tokyo. Those are called our world major marathons.
Okay.
You want to there's a medal you get if you complete all 6 of them. You get this big 6-star medal from this company called Avid World. But it's an accomplishment. And, there's not
Right.
everybody does it, so it's an accomplishment. But the thing is, not all of those marathons give you like an unlimited time limit to finish. Some of them give you 5 hours. Some of them give you 6 hours.
Oh.
So like New York really doesn't have a time limit. No, New York is as long as you finish before they take down the finish line, hey, you getting your medal, all that. Whereas like
Right.
in like
Right.
Berlin, well, shoot, the one in Tokyo, if you're not at a certain point in the race by a certain time limit, they take you off the course.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So the back of the Packers kind of have a thing like, hey, I paid my money like everybody else. As long as I finish this 26.2 miles, I should get a medal, all that. So it's a controversy right now with that, and the different marathons. But that's kind of the perspective that I wanted to have on our show is
Hmm.
someone who, now don't get me wrong, when she's trained up, India can finish a marathon in much less time than
Right.
needed, but she has that perspective of someone who maybe is not as fast as an Elliot Kipchoge, who is he's not the world record holder anymore, but he used to be anyway.
It seems like it should all be standardized as far as like you talking about the national or the major marathons. Like there should be a standard across all of those
Just
that is
depends.
followed.
Depends on the directors. Now, let me just say this: when
Hmm.
these world major marathons are taking place, these are in major cities and they are closing down major roads. That ain't cheap. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? It's not cheap to do that. So I can understand why they're not like, well, I can't just leave this road open for this
Yeah, it
whole
makes
period.
sense.
Yeah. So, but that's just kind of the way it is. Right now, it's kind of changing because, to be honest, the average runner is not, elite. The average runner's a middle of the pack person usually. Those are the
Right.
people that pay to make sure that these races can go on. If you had to make a race based off of all elite runners, you would never have a race because there's not enough of them to
To
put interest fees and all that kind of stuff to get these done.
gotcha.
Mhm. Yeah. So, but it's been a great experience doing it with India. Like I said, since 2018, we do it every other week, and sometimes we have interviews, sometimes we don't. But trust me, it's always enjoyable because the time I've been spending with India, we're used to each other and how we handle things and how we talk about things, and she always comes with great topics.
Okay, then okay. All right, now is you're speaking as far as topics. How do you pick the guests for your show?
Well, just honestly, a lot of times we'll kind of go, hey, who do you want to talk to? That's kind of how it is. Like, who are you interested in talking to right now? And we reach out to them and see if we can talk to them. Now, at this point, a lot of people call us. They send us
Wow.
emails like,
Okay.
hey, I would love to come on your show. And since we're not every week, we're every other week. So,
Mm-hmm.
we don't, it's not like we have a lot of shows. We have to turn some people down. It's like, look, we've got guests already lined up for most of the year. So unfortunately, we can't, bring you on. But we try to accommodate people that we feel have interesting stories, because that's the main part. You want somebody with an
Right, right,
interesting
right.
story to tell, or an interesting background, that kind of thing. Because trust me, I have talked to people on these podcasts, because most of, with social media, you see everybody. Like
Right.
most of the people we talk to, we know, we've seen them on social media, but then I'll bring them on the podcast and they're totally different than what I thought. You don't judge a book by its cover, because they'll be totally different than the type of person I thought I was going to talk to. And just for
Now,
an example, we
okay.
talked to a guy. His name, he's a 300. You guys can look him up on Instagram. He's called a 300-pound runner. He's a big dude. He has a run group called Slow AF. Is the name of his run group.
Okay.
His mascot is a turtle. So he embraces that whole back of the pack, that whole slow thing. But this guy works. This guy is not, he doesn't just show up to marathons. He puts in the work. He's just
Right.
not a fast runner. And, and talking to him, he was so different than what I thought I was going to talk to. I thought he was going to be more of an elitist type person, but he's a real down to earth
Down to earth.
guy.
Gotcha.
He's like a guy I would be like, hey man, let's go get a drink, kind of guy. So it was
Right.
really fun talking to him. So that's what I mean. We look for people with good stories. We look for people who feel, are trying to either they have accomplished something or they're trying to accomplish something.
Okay. Yeah, that's sort of kind of what I like to do here on I Feel You, is I look for people with interesting stories and different backgrounds. It's like when I see them, it's something inside of me. It's like, you know what? I gotta have them on, that type of thing. So
Yeah,
so I
so
get
it's
that.
kind of same
All
thing.
right.
Yeah, we have a feeling we want to talk to this person.
So, all right. So how do you do it when someone wants to come onto your show and you're really like, uh-uh. But like
Well,
you
honestly, I let India handle it. Well, that usually
okay.
I usually let her kind of tell you, like, well, and I mean, we're not that, because I mean, trust me, it's not like we got a million downloads and not a huge show,
Right.
anything like that. But we've had people reach out who want to talk about like a product they're trying to sell, or
Right.
something like that. And, we'll just be like, look, unfortunately, we don't have
It
that
doesn't
kind of,
fit with the
yeah.
show.
That we don't say it doesn't fit, but we just maybe don't have time to get you on the show. We do apologize. And usually I
Right.
found a lot of times with products, when people try, like if somebody's written a book or something like that,
Hmm.
it's their agent that's contacting us. It's not really them. So we're usually
Okay.
talking to either their publicist or something like that, and we'll just be like, yeah, unfortunately, this ain't gonna work out. And usually, if it's a publicist or an agent, they just sending out letters to all the running podcasts. We've had our podcast name in like Runner's World magazine and stuff like that. So we're
Okay.
kind of known. So I think it's just they're sending it out to all the major, not major, but all the running
Running
podcasts to try
podcast.
to get them, on the podcast. So, if it's somebody's trying to sell something, that's not somebody that we're probably going to talk to, unless the person selling it just has a good story. Like they truly have a good story and they just happen to be, selling it or wanting to, do a book or, something like that.
Okay. Have you been approached, I guess, for endorsement deals or that type of stuff?
Yeah. This is we talk about monetizing the podcast. We
Hmm.
have made money. Like we have been endorsed by local races here in Atlanta. We've been
Hmm.
endorsed by Lululemon. They paid for us to advertise for them for a race they were having here. Excuse me. One of the larger races here, one of the only races that has an African American race director is called The Race. It actually just went past. It's a half marathon, 13.1 miles, and a 5K. We always do a live podcast from their expo, because Tess,
Okay.
her name is Tess Suleiman Marshall. She always asks us, "Hey, can y'all come and do a live podcast?" And then we also advertise for the race, like, "Hey, this race is coming up," that kind of thing. But do we do we go after endorsements or monetizing? No, not really. Not to say that might not change at some point, but we really don't. We both kind of started this as just something that we enjoy doing.
All right, so she's still doing it strictly for the love.
Basically, strictly for the love. It's definitely enjoyable to me, but I'm looking at different things to see if it is viable to monetize it, because I don't want to change it too much, because we didn't start off, because I know there are ways to monetize it. You can get a patronage account where people, kind of pay you. You can do, other things. I am actually in the process of starting up another podcast. This podcast is called the Mitch and Bake Podcast. It's with my best friend. Is a guy I've known. His name is Devon Baker. He lives in
Okay.
Boston, Massachusetts. I've known this cat since kindergarten, literally. Well, not even, no, before that, daycare. We've known each other that long.
Wow.
So yeah, Winter Park, Florida. But we've started a podcast. We've done a few episodes. I can't tell, maybe 4 or 5 at this point. But I really haven't started advertising it yet, because I want to get some. I'm trying to get some episodes in our bank, and then when I
Gotcha.
start advertising it, so when people go to look at it, they have multiple ones they can listen to and kind of catch on with us. But anyway,
Gotcha.
that one I am trying to monetize, and I'm going to use whatever I learn from that one to see if maybe I can start doing that with the Run Duo as well.
Okay. Now you and your best friend. So, what is the purpose of that podcast? Just talking in general, or
Yeah, that one is more of a wide open space kind of thing. I mean, I love talking about running, but things happen on a daily basis that I have
right?
an opinion about, that I want to talk about. And
Mhm.
he's the same way. And so we were like, it's kind of like, I mean, the best way I can describe it, maybe like a barbershop. Like, we kind of, you know what it is when you go to a black
Right.
barbershop, brothers just talking about politics, sports, everything, things going on in society, that sort of thing. We haven't had any guests yet, but we are looking to start bringing on some guests.
Mhm.
Interviewing everybody from politicians, comedians, entrepreneurs, that kind of thing. So we're still finding our legs a little bit on that one. That's why I said I wanted to get some episodes under our belt before I really start, getting the Instagram page going and that kind of thing. But right now we're on Spotify. Well, we're actually everywhere.
Okay.
We're on Google, everywhere. It's called the Mitch and Bake Podcast.
Okay.
Mhm.
Gotcha. Okay. So as far as the running community in Atlanta, what would you say are I guess the premier or what African American running clubs are there in Atlanta?
Well,
Because
in
I did a
Atlanta,
Google search and I just
mhm,
want to make sure
yeah.
that the information is correct.
Well, I mean, it's in today's world, it's hard to say what an African, you know what I'm saying? Like, what
Right.
is African American now? Because we talked about this on the podcast. What makes an African American movie now? Is the star being black? Is the director being black? What makes it African American? The
Right.
only one I can really say Black Men Run and Black Girls Run. Those are definitely organizations run by African Americans.
Okay.
But like there is the West Midtown Run Club that was started by Tess Suleiman Marshall, who is an
Hmm.
African American. She's the race director I talked about earlier. But would I call it an African American run group? No. But there is the South City. I'm sorry, South. What is it called? South Gwinnett. There's a running group that's been around for like 50 years. They're one of
Oh
the
wow.
oldest running groups, and I would say they are African American. Um, uh, actually, did you know Michael Ibadibo at State Farm? I'm not. He was
The name
in
sounds familiar.
yeah, I think he was in Express for a short period when we were
Hmm.
there. But he runs with them as well. The South DeKalb running partners.
Okay.
Now that one I would say is African American. They are a true, what I would call a true run group, because they black men run and black girls run. They're run groups, but they have organizations across the U.S. Like there are
Okay.
Black Men Run groups in DC. I could hunt 50 cities across the United States from what Ed was telling me. But the South City Running Partners, South DeKalb Running Partners, they are just their group, and you have to be elected to get into the group. You can't just
Oh
show
wow.
up and say, I want to be in this group. They have a
Hmm.
process to bring people on. So I would say they are truly a what we would call a run group, and they are African American as well.
All right. So Black Men. So what I'm gathering here is Black Men Run sort of kind of has chapters in
Exactly.
different cities.
Yeah,
Okay,
they have
got you.
chapters in different cities. Same thing with Black Girls Run. They have chapters in different cities as well. Whereas South City Running Partners, like I said, they've been around for I want to say close to 50 years at this point.
Okay.
And like I said, it's not just now they'll let you run with them, like if you want to go, but I think you only can run with them for a few times before you either have to say, hey, I want to see if I can join,
Right.
whatever. I don't know for sure, but I've interviewed many of their people or their
Okay.
group members, and it sounds like a great time actually. So that's
All
one of the
right.
ones I would say is as true African American. But other than that, I mean, you have movers and pacers. Once again, started by an African American, a lot of African American runners, but I wouldn't call it an African American run group.
Okay.
Mm.
So it sounds like all the other clubs you can sort of kind of just join, I
Just
guess.
show up. Hey, show up. I want to
You,
run
you
with
just
y'all.
show up,
Yeah,
and then
yeah,
the one in South DeKalb or of the
yeah.
South, you
Running
sort of kind of
partners.
have
Yeah.
to get elected. They are really
Now, like I said, if you want to go run with them, they'll tell you where they're running, and
right.
you can go run with
Hmm.
them. But like literally, like so, when they do their runs, they do different runs in different parts of the city, and like every so often, you have to host the run. When you host a run,
Okay.
you got to provide all the food, and it's really cool though. It's a really cool organization. They're top notch. I mean, whenever there's a big race, like when there's a Peachtree Road race, they have their
Hmm.
own section. Like after the race in Piedmont, they have their own section, kind of cordoned off, where they supply food and all that kind of stuff for their members. So it's a good group to be in if that's what you want to do. And they're really
Okay.
tight. They're really tight knit group.
Okay. Now, say for instance, me.
Mm-hmm.
I was talking about how years ago you introduced me to
Yeah.
the world of running here in Atlanta. And say if I'm a newbie, I want to get back into it, or if I just want to get into it in general, where would you send someone or say someone should start?
If somebody wanted to start running, I would send them to Black Men Run. Number
Okay.
one, because Black Men Run are one of their mottos, no man left behind. And
Okay.
when you first started, that was one of the reasons they started Black Men Run, is because when you go to some of these running groups, there's some really fast runners out there.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've gone to running groups before and been left behind. These,
Right.
that's not that those running groups, they're running, 9 and 8 minute miles while they're training, which is ridiculous. But anyway,
Wow.
whereas Black Men Run, you're not going to be left behind. They stick with you, they stay with you, they come get you,
Okay.
until you get to the finish as well.
Okay.
Now, movers and pacers is also they do the same kind of thing. Excuse me. Movers and pacers is kind of, I would say their demographic is younger.
Okay.
Younger, maybe not as I hate, I don't want to, because they have some really fast runners, but maybe not as into the running. They're more into, hey, I like to run, but then also let's go have some brunch, let's get some drinks, they have a good time, that kind of
Right.
thing. But movers and pacers is one that I say the demographic kind of skews a little bit younger than like Black Men Run. Black Men Run is probably guys anywhere from that 40 on up. Whereas
Oh yeah,
movers and
that's me.
pacers, yeah, movers and pacers is probably going to be in 30s, if not younger,
Okay.
kind of age range.
All right. So it sounds like the movers and pacers, they're young enough to where they can run and still have enough energy where
Yeah,
they can go
and
drink a little bit afterwards.
exactly. Yeah,
Right.
I mean, I don't know how they are now. I know at one point they didn't do a lot of long miles. They were
Hmm.
short mileage kind of runs, just to kind of
Hmm.
get out and have a good time. But whatever gets you off the couch, it is what it is. That's what I say. If it gets you off the couch where you want to go and participate, hey, more power to you.
Okay. And speaking of off the couch, I think that's what you mentioned to me. You're like, hey man, you need to download this
Oh
app,
yeah, couch
Couch
to
to
5K.
5K.
Yes,
Yep.
yes, that's a great one. Another one that I would tell people about. This is a running app that I use
Hmm.
when I'm not trying to use a coach. It's called Run with Hal. Um,
Okay.
the Run with Hal is an app where you could actually put in what distance you're training for.
Hmm.
When is the you have if you got a goal race, you can put it in, and it puts together a running program for you, and it comes up on your phone. It alerts you, let you know, hey, tomorrow this is what you got to do, and it puts that run,
Hmm.
and you can control it because you can put in like what your pace is. So if you have a slower pace, like
Hmm.
look, what's easy for you? 10-minute mile, 12-minute mile, whatever it is, and it makes that program based on what distance you're trying to run and how long do you have until that race. It's
Okay.
made by a gentleman named Hal Higdon. Honestly, Hal Higdon is probably the place that most people went even before he had this app. He had free training programs posted online. You would just go to his website, Hal Higdon, and you could go in there and say, "Hey, I'm trying to run a half marathon in whatever weeks." And
Okay.
they had free training programs online, but now he's done the app that is a little bit more tailored and helps you because it won't even give you a full program until you've done some of the runs, so it can make sure that you're able to keep up with whatever they're doing, because it'll change the program up if it looks like, hey, you're not really been able to keep this pace up, so I'm going
Right.
to change it up a little bit. So it's a great app. It's a free app. They have a version where you pay, but you
Hmm.
can download the free version. I use the free version, and it
Right.
works perfectly for me.
Okay. 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 Well, all right. So as far as the Run Duo podcast, what do you got? What do you see? In what direction do you see yourself taking the podcast in the future?
Well, I mean, I think we're kind of gonna stay with like I
Yeah.
said, we are looking at maybe monetizing it. So we may, we may throw some money in there for advertising to get a bigger audience, but we're gonna kind of keep doing what we're doing until we don't feel like doing it anymore. Now, I have 2 kids now, so of course it's not as easy to
Right.
do things. She just got married, and so she'll
Gotcha.
probably be having a kid soon.
Right.
So I don't know if she's gonna want to keep doing it, but we'll do it for as long as we feel like it. And once we don't feel like it anymore, we'll shut it down. I'm pretty sure myself personally, I always have some kind of podcast out there because it's just what I enjoy doing. I like talking shit a lot. So
Right.
I enjoy it. It bring it's kind of like my release
Right.
because I'll be in the car and I'll hear something on the radio, be like, what? And I want to talk about it. And this is
Right.
kind of like getting on the podcast, getting to I don't maybe nobody's listening. I don't know, but it's a way for me to get my release and kind of get things off my chest.
Gotcha. 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 All right. Well, everyone out there in the audience or whatever, um, we're coming to the end of the podcast. Like I said, we have Thomas Mitchell, of co-host, one of the co-hosts of the Run Duo podcast. And before we leave, Thomas, do you have any parting words for anyone out there who's listening?
Well, hey, I mean, if you're into running or you want to get into running, like I said, I personally like to have a goal.
Hmm.
I always train better when I'm training towards something. So I always find some kind of race or some kind of challenge, whether that just to get faster or whatever. I put that in front of me, and that helps me keep my consistency
That
of
makes sense.
training, because consistency is really what it's about. I'm telling y'all, like I said, when I first started running, I could barely run a mile. Shoot, I have not been running as consistent since I've had my kids. Um, just because it's not that I didn't have the time, but I'd rather not be tired. I'd rather spend my time with my children. But
Right.
beginning of this year, I said I'm gonna get consistent again, and I have pretty much been consistent most of this year, and you can tell the difference. If you could put in a solid 6 months, I'm telling you, it's like a night and day difference. So stay consistent, set a goal, find some fun people to run with. Hey, if you're in an area where you can't find anybody to run with, run by yourself, but just set a goal, put together a training program, and get out there.
Okay. Well, Thomas, I certainly appreciate you coming on the show and accepting my invitation, sir. And I thank you for the knowledge you've given to us as far as the running community in Atlanta and nationwide, worldwide. And to everyone out there, thank you for tuning in to I Feel You, the podcast. This is Dwayne, your host, signing off. See you
All
later.
right. Thanks, Dwayne.
Yes, sir. Welcome to I Feel You, the podcast with your host, Dwayne Washington. I was born and raised with my family, my mom, my daddy Ronnie, my other daddy Dwayne, and my brother Quincy. I grew up in the 90s and 2000s surrounded by nothing but friends and family in the tight-knit community of Cartersville, Georgia. After graduation, I attended Savannah State University where I loved to party and experiment with a lot of drugs. I was even homeless for a point in time in my life. But that was then, and this is now. I'm growing and evolving into a better person each and every day. And with that, I would like to say welcome to season 2 of I Feel You, the podcast.